Welcome to Imagine Otherwise, the podcast about the people and projects bridging art, activism, and academia to build better worlds. Episodes offer in-depth interviews with creators who use culture for social justice and explore the nitty-gritty work of imagining otherwise. I'm your host, Cathy Hanneback. This is a special episode of the Imagine Otherwise podcast and is the last in our three-part miniseries exploring the APAC Culture Lab coming up July 7th through 9th in Honolulu, Hawaii. APAC is organized by the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, otherwise known as APAC. Most of APAC's participants are based in or rooted in Hawaii, with the majority of artists identifying as Pacific Islanders. Across the 3 episodes of this miniseries, I talk with curators, artists, and scholars involved with APAC about the themes that this culture lab brings together, ranging from climate change and environmental activism in Hawaii, solidarities and activism across the Pacific archipelago, queer and trans Indigenous art, Hawaiian sovereignty and the ongoing fight against U.S. colonialism in the region, and the way that racial, gender, national, decolonial, and environmental convergences in Hawaii help us imagine and produce different worlds. In this episode, I talk with 3 of the artists participating in APAC: Solomon Enos, Abigail Romanchak, and John Hina, otherwise known as Prime. Solomon is a native Hawaiian artist born and raised in the Makahaha Valley in Oahu, Hawaii. As self-described intelligent optimist, Solomon's art expresses his aspirational vision of the world at its best, which is at times deployed through polyfantastic or science fiction narratives. His work touches on themes of ancestry and identity, the human relationship with the earth, and the future of Hawaii, its peoples, and its resources. Abigail is a visual artist and printmaker based in Hawaii who uses her prints to empower and assert a native Hawaiian sense of identity. As an artist, she seeks to perpetuate traditional Hawaiian culture through contemporary means so that it may endure for generations to come. Prime is an American graffiti artist who's based in Honolulu, Hawaii. He's the founder of 808 Urban Collective, which brings together community cultural workers, artists, organizers, and volunteers committed to improving the quality of life through arts programming. His unique method of youth development is rooted in the art of graffiti muralism, a visual vocabulary of the streets that he's harnessed as a cultural tool for positive social change. In our interview, we chat about the personal and collective convergences that have shaped these artists' lives, their visions for social change and community justice, and the pieces that they're planning for the upcoming APAC Culture Lab. Thanks, you 3, for being with us.
Oh, thank you for creating this interview, Cathy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, mahalo.
So I'd love to talk about the theme of APAC, which is convergence. I'm curious how this is showing up in your work and how you've used it to approach the projects that you're creating for the Culture Lab.
You know, I'm going to be interpreting the theme of APAC quite literally. And so I'm really interested in how the current volcanic activity of Pu'u'o crater on Hawaii Island affects existing coastal landscapes. And so with my work, I'm going to be looking at the convergence of land and sea and focusing on imagery from underground magma movement. I'll be carving 5 large-scale wood blocks, and the imagery that I'm sketching onto these wood blocks and I'll be carving and printing are actual seismograph readings or harmonic tremors from Pu'u'o crater. And a seismograph or a harmonic tremor is it's sort of like the continuous record of the underground movement of magma.
Thinking about our shorelines got me thinking about importing and exporting because we import everything now. I wanted to take this opportunity, instead of going with the visual arts, which I usually do, I want to go with farming. So my idea is to create, take my space and create like a store, because it's in an old store called Foodland that I remember going into many years ago. It's an interesting place because it's Ala Moana Shopping Center and everyone goes there to do shopping. But in my little space, it's like I'm gonna have plant food in Foodland, but your money is no good. Kind of bringing awareness that we don't have to depend on the ship to get everything that we need. We can just grow our own. You know, if we want to change the world, then we need to learn how to grow our own food. And then we can start changing the way people see things. Taking Korean natural farming techniques and then using what we're used to seeing every day on the stores, like the Pepsis and the Diet Pepsis and the waters, and then filling that up with plant food, putting it on shelves, and then asking people what story do they have, or what value do they have to share.
Right.
So it's a few different angles that I'm going with this. I wanted to print out some pictures of the Matson containers and all the ships that are coming in, and then post it on the wall. Like, once upon a time, we used to import 95% of our food,
Right.
and this is where it came in, these little vessels. But now we're able to grow our own food. So going back to the past, going to the future, and really like telling people, no, you can grow your own food, and you can live a much healthier life.
I love that, because it's like when we talk about the nitty gritty, it's gotta unpack it. We talk about what is food security, right? The nitty gritty of food security. It's almost like, if you look at food security as like a watch, great. Well, open that watch up. Look at what all the gears are inside food security. What does it mean? And I just love that you're breaking it down for people, so that they walk out of Foodland thinking about like, wow, yeah, I can totally transform my relationship with growing food. I'm working on creating a series of these almost like Kikaida-esque figures. And it's because when I went to Ala I used to go to Shirakia, and I used to buy, and I never could afford all these cool Kikaida and Kamen Rider characters. And like, I used to just drool and look at them and be like, wow, I want to make my own toys. So I grew up making my own toys and all the Ultramans and everything like that. And so what I decided to do was create a series of sculptures that look at one glance like the neatest, latest Japanese manga robot. And it's meant to be these figures, which what they are plant-based robots. They are robots that are farmed and are grown from the earth. And because of it, when they get deprogrammed, there's nothing toxic about them. They just return back to the earth again. But it is basically plant-based robotics.
Very cool. So are either Solomon or Abigail, are you exploring a theme that you've touched on in some of your earlier work, or is this a new approach for you?
I have used mapping in my past work. And so for the biennial at the Contemporary Museum, I used the mapping of the efforts of conservationists in the East Maya watershed. And so I took all of their GPS tracking lines of the work they did, and I carved large wood blocks and created this sort of mosaic of prints recording the trails they created with their conservation efforts. So I've definitely mapped geological information before in my work, but this is new in the sense that I've never worked with seismograph or harmonic imagery. And I am a little bit interested in it, not just because of the theme Aikai and convergence and where land meets sea, but my grandfather, Agaton Abbott, was a geologist, and he was a professor at the University of Hawaii and published the book Volcanoes in the Sea. So, growing up with that book in our house and knowing his work as a geologist in Hawaii, I'm excited to sort of continue on with the family tradition of researching geology in Hawaii.
So several months ago, all of the artists and curators and scholars involved with Aikai got to actually be in the same room and meet each other for the first time back in April in Honolulu. And I know that was a very powerful experience for me, and talking with other people, it seems like they had a kind of similar reaction. So I would love to hear from the three of you how that first artist convening, where we were all in the same space and discussing the kind of themes that Aikai raises, I'm curious how that first artist convening is shaping the way that you're approaching your project.
Anytime we have visitors come to the islands, we take pride in representing our culture. We take pride in showing them like how many great things we have to offer here in Hawaii. For such a small island, it's like we have everything. And then when people come experience the islands, they get a sense. No wonder why everyone likes to go to the island. It's not only beautiful, it's magical, and the magic is in the people. So we take on that responsibility with pride, and we want to give them the best of what we have. And in turn, when we go to visit their space, they always make the time to give us the best that they have. So that's the reciprocation that happens there. And like I was saying earlier, I chose not to go with the visual because I felt like this was the opportunity for them to come and experience my island. And I have to show them what we have. And what we have is we have so much fertility. We have a god named after it, right? after the fertility that we have here. Instead of drawing a picture or painting a picture of what that looks like, fertility and everything that encompasses that akua or that god, I wanted to take the opportunity to use the resources that we have here that I know of, going to the local farms. I'm currently making my production line over here for my installation, and then using it as a platform to display like how much Hawaii depends on tourism. It's so heavy as far as consumerism. Hawaii is, oh man, we're horrible in that arena. And then knowing that we're at our biggest shopping mall on the island, it just made too much sense for me not to take this opportunity to go that route. Something that's out of my own personal box. I mean, I'm practicing it on a small scale, but to design a store that where money has no value, only people and relationships carry value. Like over here, if we go to someone's house, we'll take a gift. So this one here is like you come to a store and they'll gift you. Like come with the wrong attitude and you get nothing, and you can walk out of my store with nothing. Right? So it's that kind of relationship building that I wanted to establish here for my installation and for the people visiting.
I think, first of all, just to sit in a room with artists really from all over the world sharing their ideas was so exciting to me. To have that time to really listen to each other's ideas about Aikai and what convergence means to them in person, live, was such a rare opportunity. So I love that. I personally came to the artist convening in April with a relatively clear vision of the work I wanted to create for Aikai. So I don't think that meeting with the other Aikai artists necessarily shaped my project, but rather it really encouraged me to carry on with the vision I proposed, because I feel like I got such an enthusiastic response from my fellow Aikai artists, and I definitely feel like I brought that energy and that enthusiasm back to my studio. And as I continue to carve and print these plates, I feel all of their sort of excitement behind my project. I feel as if they're here with me.
Are any of you collaborating with other artists on your pieces?
I am. I'm going to actually be collaborating with my printmaking professor from UH that I studied with many years ago. His name is Charles Cohan. And this collaboration was rather serendipitous because I asked him, I said, would you mind helping me print these wood blocks due to the scale, the size, and the sort of the technical difficulty that's involved with printing large. And once he realized the imagery I was working with and the plates I was carving, he couldn't believe how similar it is to the current work he's producing for a solo show at the Honolulu Museum of Art this December. So he's looking at sort of the forces of geophysical change and looking at what happens above and below Earth's surfaces. And so the plates he is creating, they relate perfectly to the work I'm doing. And one is going to be, it's sort of like this relationship between recorded and transcribed carved imagery. Mine is from actual recordings of magma movement, and his is more with his own hand creating these strata-like lines of the Earth's surface. So the collaboration came about sort of midway through my process. And when I proposed this to Adriel, he said, sure, let's bring Charlie on board and have him be a part of Aikai. And he thinks that our print collaboration will be interesting, and he can't wait to see our prints sort of hung side by side in the Aikai Culture Lab.
Prime and Solomon, how about you?
We've been working together, me and Saul. We know each other for years. So it's just another opportunity for us to get to share breath in the same space and then share it with everyone else. And
because we both participated in the last event in New York, in Manhattan, we both got a sense of what that was to create a conceptual village, both as a village full of concepts and as it is a conceptual village, and that providing a pop-up dream, a pop-up collective dream that collectively allows that community that dream manifests in to collectively dream for a little while around an idea. And then when it disappears, it stays, because it's a memory that people had of like going to a show, being exposed to like 50, 100 different kinds of ideas. It kind of makes me think about somebody who's looking for a combination for their lock, somebody to unlock their own who they are. And you go to this kind of event, and if you're exposed to like 50 radical different kinds of ideas in such a condensed space, you're going to walk out of there at least unlocking a little bit of who you are as an individual. And I think that's why I think the expressive shot of an experience, of what these kind of these culture labs represent to me are so important that I think what Prime and I are trying to do, not only do we want to provide a really important experience, a good experience for this event, we want these kinds of events to happen all the time.
So you brought up APAC's Culture Lab model, and I think this is a really fantastic example of a kind of innovative approach to culture making and community making. So I'm curious how you've experienced this and maybe how this model has helped you explore certain questions in your work.
I really love the Smithsonian APAC approach. It's different ideas from different cultures, different communities in one space. Just the interaction between artists, their display, and people for a short period of time in a really, really great location. I think that's a really good formula that all museums should start looking into.
I think for me, knowing that my prints and all of the other artists' work will be accessible to a diverse audience is what excites me most about my participation with AICAI. And I'm thrilled to know that the viewers who come to this year's Culture Lab won't feel intimidated to engage with the artists and their work. And, I think it'll truly be a collaborative experience for artists and viewer, which feels way more community-minded and less exclusive. It's such a wonderful opportunity for all of us with very different backgrounds to come together and not feel intimidated and kind of share each other's expertise and ideas. It's not an opportunity I have very often as a visual artist, so I'm grateful for that.
The reason why we also want to do good at this and to really create a great event is that we want other institutions to fund culture labs also. See, that's what's important. It's to say not just the Smithsonian, but other institutions can be doing what the Smithsonian model is setting up. So not only success within the Smithsonian, but success as a role model for how other institutions can create an artistic, conceptual wing to their how they communicate.
So many of the artists involved with AICAI, and you three are great examples of this, are producing work that kind of pushes at the boundary or the relationship between humanity and the planet. And some people are approaching it through issues of climate change, some through issues of decolonization and the struggle for that in the Pacific. Some folks are approaching it through indigeneity and issues of land and identity. And so I'm curious if these are themes that you three have explored in your work before, or is this a new opportunity with the AICAI Culture Lab?
Climate change is probably the most relevant theme in my work, and not so much specifically for the work I'm creating for AICAI, but my most recent body of work, which is now showing at the Lands Museum in Hanover, Germany, really addresses climate change, specifically in Hawaii. And so for this exhibit, I created a series of prints that were microscopic images of diatoms, and diatoms are the skeletal wall of phytoplankton. And I chose this image to work with because when I was thinking about climate change and ocean acidification in Hawaii, I really thought about the diatom being this indicator of health and well-being in our marine ecosystems. And, once our oceans become too acidic, the diatom is not able to form, and ultimately, our marine food chains collapse. So I felt that these microscopic maps of wellness or destruction in our Hawaiian ocean waters, they had many parallels to the lives of Native Hawaiians, sort of the similar struggle that Hawaiians are trying to maintain and protect land and oceans. So like I said, it's not so much present in the carvings that I'm doing for AICAI, but it's definitely been part of my subject matter in previous bodies of work.
So this brings me to my favorite and my final question, which gets at the heart of this podcast, as well as what I think AICAI is offering in terms of a model and a community. So one of the things I get to talk to guests about is their version of a different world, that world that they're working towards when they create their art, when they step in front of a classroom, when they write their novel, when they produce whatever it is that they produce magically in the universe. So I'll ask you this big sometimes scary question, but I think it's a question that we don't get enough opportunities to ask each other, and we don't get enough opportunities to answer. So, what kind of world are you working towards? What kind of world do you want?
This is such a great question, and I really want to thank you for asking such an important question. It's interesting, now that I'm a mother of 2 young children, I definitely think about the world I want for my son and daughter to live in. And this might sound trite, but I'm going to say it anyway. I want a world that is safe, not just safe from war and violence, but a world where it's safe to express yourself, no matter what race, gender, political, or religious background you come from. And in a way, I feel like these culture labs that the Smithsonian has created feels like a mini model for what I'm talking about. It feels like a safe place for sharing ideas and expressing yourself, no matter how different your backgrounds may be.
What about you, Solomon? What kind of world are you working towards?
We learn to love each other. We learn to love each other, and we put empathy as the most important source of power, the most important kind of power, and that we create systems which cultivate empathy. If we can crawl out of the oceans, if we can lose our tails, if we can build rocket ships, then we can love each other. And I think that's the one. I mean, that to me seems like we've evolved so many magical things, and we've created so much amazing magic, except we've somewhere along this path, we dropped the ring, the proverbial ring that we're supposed to be carrying to Mordor. We dropped it. And that ring was loving each other.
For me, it's about, we as humans, we need to eat, right? Yeah. And so what do we feed each other? Not just the physical food, but the spiritual food. It's about what do we grow? What do we cultivate? What kind of food do we feed each other? Yeah, and so just creating things that, our children love to eat and will continue to eat for many generations to come. Memories are considered food, right? Because we consume them. When I think about how do we change the world, it's really how do we feed each other? We're so good at identifying the problems, and the answer is just as obvious, but because of our nature, because of our habits that we grow up in, our environment, we cannot see the solution. We can only see the problem, right? And that goes back to a story that Pono Shim told me, and it was about the crabs in the bucket. Anytime a crab tries to crawl out of the bucket, you have 10 more pulling them down, right? And that's kind of like how society works. And the problem is not the crab. The problem is the bucket. The buckets of religion, the buckets of government, the buckets of education. Like these buckets need to be tipped over so the crabs can be free. How do we do that? We need to paint a picture so people can see or be reminded. Us doing murals on a wall, people are just constantly reminded of the host culture, because we're a culture that's been displaced on our own land, right? So our thing is to keep painting the pictures. So while the kids are learning, they're consuming this bit of information. Yeah. And then as the general public passes by and they consistently see our work on the streets, they're consuming bits of information, and then it makes them curious. So bringing them together, and that's just our small part in the bigger picture, and how do we contribute to society and make it a better place.
I think Prime was sharing was so important is because there's a whole ecosystem of a family of idealists. And I think when we talk about idealism, the further far out the idea is, the longer the lever. So the further you go, the far out you go, the more torque you can have on the immediate, right? So in other words, you need wacko long-range thinkers like myself, as you do need folks, and I think that's why what you really represent, Prime, is, so what do we do about it now? Yeah. Here's these big lofty ideas, guys. What do we do about it right now in the store, in that culture lab? And that people are going to be offering in this event are going to be offering a whole range of different kinds of what do we do about this now. Some people are going to be working on what do we do about this in a month. Some people are going to be working on what do we do about this in a year. I'm shooting for the 400,000 years, but
that's a good way to put it. The farther back we can look, the farther forward we can see.
There it is, right there.
Thanks for listening to this special episode of the Imagine Otherwise podcast. Be sure to check out the upcoming APAC Culture Lab, July 7th through 9th in Honolulu, Hawaii. APAC is organized by the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, a migratory museum that brings Asian Pacific American history, art, and culture to you through innovative museum experiences online and throughout the United States. To find out more about APAC and read about the amazing artists and scholars whose work APAC features, go to smithsonianapa.org/AEKAI. The Imagine Otherwise podcast is produced by Ideas on Fire, an academic editing and consulting agency that works with progressive interdisciplinary academics. You can view the show notes for this episode, created by Priyanka Kara, on the Ideas on Fire website at ideasonfire.net, as well as find links to the people, projects, and resources discussed.